So here is another Knit Spin Farm yarn self-striping sock, and I was playing around with another 3-row motif, and it turned out really interesting because it's acting a little bit like brioche. It's not exactly like brioche, but it's got two main features. It's got the cloaking of knit stitches and sort of an expanded double row contrast with regular stockinette. And then it's also got this really squishy, stretchy effect. This yarn happens to be the sport weight, so it's even extra squishy, and I'm gonna give this pair of socks to my brother. I think it'll be really nice and cozy for winter housewear. I'll show you the inside. It's got the vertical columns, just like other color loops. And because I was just playing around, I started out thinking that this would be just 1 foot increments, and then I would like the colors to change. Turned out that the 1 foot here ended me back up on the same color. So, and here's 1 foot of the light blue, and then it ended up being dark blue. Here's a green that ended up. So, two things. I would say that I don't think this is the perfect stitch match for self-striping yarn. I think it looks a little too busy, but I think it will look really good on a solid. And to finish this pair of socks, I wanted to do as matching as possible without doing the 1 foot increments, because starting and stopping the color loops in this case was not worth it. So this sock will end up being a close match just by virtue that I know how many feet I did for these, and I know when I started them. I'm not starting the second color loops in exactly the same spot here, but I am using the exact same number of feet per color loop in total. So by the time I end up, my heel stripes are going to be the same. They are the same. And I end up being the same striping down the foot. So here I am. I'll demonstrate a little bit of this. Oh dear, am I at the plain stockinette part? Well, I'll pause and do that real quick. Okay, so here I am at the first color loop. It's pretty short. It's a 3-stitch process and a 3-row process. For this row, it is the row that I knit with the color loop. The other 2 rows I don't. So the first stitch is regular knit. The middle stitch is going to be the color loop stitch. I'm sorry, I'm going out of screen to just grab the color loop. There it is. Just wrap it over, and you see there's not much left there. So then you just drop it and pick up your yarn again and start knitting. So, and then I have the in-between row is nothing, just stockinette. Okay, again, these are the longer color loops, so these won't be ending. But I'm going to do the same thing. I have all the color loops happening, doing the same thing on each row, so they're not staggered. So knit, color loop, got my strands tangled there a little bit. So you can see it better with the blue. The brown sort of hides in there, but that's knit, color loop, knit, 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 color loop, knit. And I'm going to do that all the way across the row. Okay, I'm now ready to do the second row. There's the color loop, and the stitch before it I'm going to knit with the first strand of the color loop. So I separate it, grab the color loop strand and knit it together with that stitch. So this is the second row. So that's the first cloaked stitch. Then I make a yarn over, and for the second cloaked stitch, I'm going to go through the back loop and grab the other strand of the color loop with that knit neighbor stitch, like knitting two together through the back loop. So that's the 3 stitches again. So it's the first strand of the color loop with the first stitch, a yarn over, the second strand of the color loop with the neighbor stitch, and there you have 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. And you can see this color loop is shortened quite a bit. I may not be able to do anything with it from now on, and that would be fine. I could just take the stitch marker out and that would be the end. So the next color loop is a contrast color, so it'll show a little bit better. So there's my in-between stitch. Now I have the 3 stitches, and I'm going to grab that first strand and knit it together with its neighbor stitch. There it is. It's a little elongated. It will when I do the next color loop stitch, it pulls in a bit, so it won't be quite that loose. So that's the first strand with the first stitch, a yarn over, and the second strand I'm going to go through the back loop and grab it and its neighbor stitch together, like knitting 2 together through the back loop. And there's the 3 stitches. And you can see the color loops hanging there. And if you tug it, just to do the next stitch even, you don't even have to pull it tight. It stays elongated over those 2 rows, but you don't want it tighter than that, because then you would have a shrunken row. So then I do an in-between stitch, and I'm going to do the next color loop in the same way. So there's the first stitch, a yarn over, and the second stitch. And then my in-between stitch. The first, I hope you can see this, first color loop stitch with the neighbor stitch to the right. I need a little bit more yarn here. Yarn over, second color loop strand. So the color loop goes together, separate, and then the next row I don't even need to show you, because what you do is you just knit all the way with your main yarn, just to give it sort of a separation row. So you can see here, that was this row. You can see I guess you can't see. It looks like it. Yeah, it's sort of mysterious how this middle row never has a real solid effect. Okay, here I am. I thought I wasn't going to show you the knit across row, but actually this is a perfect example to show you what you can do if you do have just a little bit left in your color loop. So if it's ready to end, but you don't have enough to do a full wrap around your needle to make another color loop stitch, what you can do is on this row, you can use that middle stitch as one of your stockinette stitches. So I used my main yarn for the first stitch of the 3-stitch motif. But for this stitch, the middle yarn over stitch, I'm going to bring my color loop up and use this very last part of the loop as that next stitch. It's too bad that it's the same color as my main yarn. If you have a contrast color, it still looks good. It's just one little single stitch left of the end of the color loop. Then you switch back to your main yarn, and this color loop is ended. You can take that out. It's all incorporated now, and it won't look any different than the other stitches because it's the same color. If it were the contrast color, it would just be a little blip there, and it would be very pretty. So that's the first color loop ended. This next color loop, of course, is longer, so it won't end for a little bit. This color loop, this next brown one that I have, looks like I can do the same thing because I just have a little bit. And I don't want to leave this too loose, so I will do the same thing there. This one looks too tight, so I'll just leave it. I can take this out now. That will be done. I don't want my stitches to fall off there. This one looks, I can't tug it really, so it's done. And I know this last one is super tight, so it's done. Okay, so I think that's it for showing you how to do this type of color loop stitch. I hope you try it. Show me your projects. I would love to see that. This pattern was really easy to do, but as I was doing it, I realized making it in 1 foot increments didn't really make sense because of the way the yarns were contrasting with the stripes. So instead, on the second sock, I'm not sure which one is which now. I guess this was the second sock. This is the first sock. I just made much longer loops so that I could just keep on knitting, and that was easy. But I really was thinking maybe that it would be best not to have it be self-striping yarn, and just enjoy the striking pattern that is really easy to make. It almost looks like a brioche stitch because of the way the contrast yarn makes a cloak on the neighboring stitches. And this almost looks like velvet to me, black on white. I wanted to do longer loops. So for this sock, I cast on 72 stitches because I didn't want to overstretch this stitch and make it look like this. I wanted it to have this ridge look. So I made it a bigger sock. This is still pretty fine yarn. I used my slip stitch for about 12 rows to bring in the top of the ankle a little bit. And then I was going to do my version of the Fish Lips Kiss heel, which I've modified over the years. And I decided to try something new even now. I finished the first half of the increases, and then I actually knit around twice with the vertical color loops. That's very easy to incorporate the pattern as I went around twice. And so I finished the heel on this sock, and I really like it. I went around twice as I just described, and I decreased a stitch as I went around the first time by knitting the slip stitch that I usually do excuse me, with the first instep stitch on each side. And I actually did some more decreases as I continued down the foot because I didn't want the foot to be just too big. But I really like how there's no gap, and it really made a nice shaped heel, I think. I tried it on my foot and it fits really well. Maybe the deepest heel I've ever made because of the 72 stitches. I don't quite need that, but it's going to be nice and comfortable. Anyhow, the vertical color loops turned out really well. They're really easy. This is a mindless knit, really. It's when you have just such a simple pattern like this, it's just so easy. TV knitting for sure. And I got a little bit lucky and my color loops went all the way to the toe. I didn't think they would go quite that long. These were 8-foot color loops, and we have about almost 10 inches of the length of the pattern. So I don't know if you can see that. So it's not exact, but so it's more like 9.5 inches. And this one was just slightly longer, which is okay. That happens sometimes. The way these ended, I did have just enough to bring the last bit of the loop up to take the place of the yarn over in the 2-stitch pattern. And I really like how that looked. This one was a little bit different because I had just a little bit too much to leave hanging, so I did another stitch right there. That's why it looks a little bit messy. But I also wanted to show the inside of this sock. Isn't that pretty? The design looks really lacy. It doesn't look like a wrong side if this were stockinette here and then this would be purled. I think that would be really pretty if everything from this stitch around to here would be stockinette. So that would be something to consider for future experimentation. The wrong side is always fun to look at for color loops. So that's this sock without using self-striping yarn. I think I'll list this design separately on Ravelry as vertical brioche, even though it's not brioche, but just because it cloaks the knit stitches and makes it squishy like this. So that's an interesting design to consider for maybe some of your projects. I'd also like to say, since I don't think I clearly said it yet, I would really like to create a pattern that is more general on Ravelry where people can post their experimental projects, and I am going to call it Shortloop Socks because of these designs where I was at least starting to do just 1-foot increments. And I'm flexible on that. I'm flexible on everything as long as projects can be posted somewhere where I can see them. Please feel free to do that. And I'll put links below to Ravelry pages where you can post projects. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing your projects as well. Here's another example of knitting with self-striping yarn. This is Knit Spin Farm yarn in the colorway Iris, You Were Here. Iris, You Were Here. Really cool. It's got thick stripes and then it's got thin stripes, and I used the thin stripes to do a front of sock pattern using 1-foot long color loops spaced every 8 stitches, and then because the color loops hang from 2 different stitches, right, I just used those 2 stitches as adjacent color loop stitches, and every time I came to a thin stripe, I did the same thing, staggered. And it just turned out that the yarn spacing was sort of perfect. I think any yarn that this would make a really striking effect, but it might not have exactly these perfect square blocks. That was pretty cool how that worked out. So I thought I would just do the front of the sock all the way down, sort of like the alligator effect, but you could definitely do all the way around. You could stop at the foot. You could, with color loops, you can choose to do whatever you like. To match the pair, I'm not going to start exactly the same because I sort of messed up the spacing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I did 5 and the pink starting here instead of just doing in between, like 5, 4, 5, 4. I went 5, 5, then 4, then 5. So I sort of messed it up, but I don't think that will matter so much as I duplicate on this sock, and I'll show you how I did it. I just need to finish, whoops. Just need to knit around to where I am, but it's pretty easy. Really, this is self-explanatory. The only thing worth mentioning is that you measure the color loops in 1 foot, increments in every 8 stitches, and if you were not doing thick and thin stripes or regular spacing of the stripes, one thing you can do is whenever you get to the end of your color loop, say I was finishing the last inch or so, then I would make a new color loop regardless of what color it was. That would still have a really striking effect, I think. So how I do it is I knit this with that strand. I don't cross it. And I knit the next one with its strand. You can see the gap there. It's nice. It's self-explanatory. And I do that until the color loop runs out, and I do it every row. If I were going to make another color loop right now, I would knit 3 and then make a color loop into this stitch, and then the color loops would hang between those middle stitches. There would be 2 stitches here, a color loop hanging from that one, a color loop hanging from that one, strand I mean. The color loop hangs in between these 2 stitches. Then there would be 2 stockinette stitches, and then you probably would be ending these 2 stitches with the end of the loop. So that's how this sock works. Pretty easy, and I think really effective with Knit Spin Farm yarns, of course. I love them. So I'll show you the finished socks as soon as I finish them. Okay? And on the inside, it's totally neat. Like all Color Loops designs, you don't lose any stretch. This is not like normal color work. It's just really clean. So here's another design that I hope people will try, and I'll try to post it on Ravelry in a way that you can just do your own thing, but post pictures so that I can see them, other people can see them. I think that would be fun. So I've been knitting the quasi pair to this Canon Dye Works self-striping sock, and I was doing little diamonds out of 1 foot color loops, and on this matching pair I was trying to get a little bit cleaner look by knitting, I don't know if you can see it, knitting the loops together until I got to the end of the color so that I wasn't doing the diagonals against the same color. And it was working pretty well. I don't love the look of it though. And then I was starting to get into watching YouTube videos about Bohu's strychnine knitting, and I just thought, you know, what an opportunity I have to play with that with these colors. They're all sort of jewel colors, muted, so there's not a, as you can see, there's not a huge contrast. But I thought, you know, color loops are a great way to potentially knit with 4 colors at a time on a row. And as you can see here, I've got yellow, red, blue, and purple all on the same row. And that not every row has 4 colors, but it's got this Fair Isle boho style look to it. And one of the things that I really liked about the boho designs is that they really do have a lot of vertical shaping. So, I mean, this is just the beginning of my experiment. I just was really playing with different stitches and different stitch patterns, and I was having so much fun with this. I think this is really pretty. I liked that a lot. I was doing purl stitches, so that's why there's purl floats here. That has its place, but I probably would do things a little bit differently if I did it again. I really like the vertical designs intermixed with color changes, because in Bohusstickung, or however they say it, I'm sorry about my pronunciation, there's vertical mixed with horizontal, and that's really part of the magic of color work, I think. And so color loops really could do that quite easily, and you could make short or longer loops depending on how far you want your design to stretch down into a yoke or a hat or whatever you were working on. So that was pretty exciting. And also I was playing with the heel on this sock as well, and I did all my decreases on after churning the heel, so that they weren't up here. And I think I really like that. It fits well, it fits smoothly, and it keeps the decreases out of your instep pattern work. And it means you can put your pattern work deeper across, stretch it wider across the instep. So this patterning is not just the top of the foot, it is also a little bit on the side of the foot, which is nice. So it makes it a more rich detail. So I think this was a success, and my sister doesn't really mind having 2 different socks. These sort of match enough. The stripes actually end up in the same place. The magic of color loops is that if you use pretty much the same lengths of color loops, ultimately you'll end up with a sock that sort of matches. I could have made it exactly matching, but that wasn't as important to me as experimenting a little bit here, so that was fun. And playing with the idea of doing a knit along via YouTube, where I make a short video demonstrating a section and do like a section every week. And so hopefully it wouldn't be overwhelming. It would just be like, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then, you know, wait a week so that you can do both socks, and you have something pretty intricate and exciting at the end. And I'd like it if people could comment and say whether they would be interested in something like that. And I also think this would be a good jumping off point for doing something similar for a sweater. I think sweater patterns are really easy to do, but really hard to read sometimes. So if I did a video instead and, you know, got you through a yoke, a yoked color loop sweater, it could be really fun and easy and not take that long. And I think YouTube would be a good way to do that. So let me know what you think. I am working on finishing my Ohlone sweater, and I've got the yoke done. The numbers have worked well, and I'm just going to show you real quick. I'll show you. It looks on the right side and on the wrong side, and I haven't even taken out the stitch markers yet for the last stitch, but all of them can come out now, and that's just the end of that color loop. And when this washes, this wool will bloom a little bit, and I think it'll expand and fill out some of these yarn over increases. The way this works is, well, these are my notes. This is my pattern essentially. I just wrote down the number of motifs I wanted for the different color loop spines, so I could take that out too. I like things to be really easy. So the first, here's my yarn tail. This, and this are how you start. And then you do short rows back and forth, and the only increases are in the motifs. By the time you reach here, the next spine, you've got a wedge effect, and you can see the shape of the sweater growing already. And this is nice because it raises the back of the neck. And then the only tricky part, which is written in the pattern, is how you have to sort of get past the spine to continue your increases. And because you want all the increases to happen on the same side of the row, one side is slightly different than the other in that respect, about how you pass the spine. That's really the only tricky thing about this, but you continue in the exact same way, all the increases only happening in the motif until you reach the V of the neck. So here's the V, and once you get here, then you start going, I'm sorry, I'm out of the screen, but you can start knitting in the round there, and it's even easier at that point. Everything just sort of flows until your loops end, and then you're knitting in the round. You've done all your increases, and you just knit until your yoke is the correct length for you. I put a marker here because I wanted to know that I wanted to knit 3 more inches before stopping. So I think I'm at the point where I want to separate for sleeves, and this sweater is practically done as far as I'm concerned. So I have sent the pattern off to get a little bit of assistance on it, and because pattern writing is not easy for me, and I'm hoping for test knitters. So if you happen to be interested, let me know. I would love test knitters for this project, and I'll give you a little look about how this looks on me. So here I've got the yoke on. I wanted to knit it larger so that I could have it layer properly. I think it's going to be very loose this time. This is definitely a little bit too big compared with the prototype, which is looser. I mean tighter, sorry. But this, so I did feel like this was too tight on me, but it's probably how most people would like their sweater to fit. So maybe maybe I am a large and not an extra large. But you can use the measurements in the pattern to decide which size you want to knit, knowing that it runs large. It also depends on what your wool is like. I think this Brooklyn tweed shelter did knit up differently than the Fleece and Harmony Selkirk worsted. So, and I think that after I wash this, I'm not going to block it heavily. I'm going to let it bloom, and I think it will be the size that I want it to be. I don't like super tight things if it's something that I wear a lot. For special occasions or you know, if I had a more public life, I think I would wear more tailored clothes, but if it's just for me. Also, in the pattern, I have specified 3 different positions for sleeve separation, because my body, my shoulders slope forward. You know, a lot of people who do a lot of computer work, or I play piano and flute, so my shoulders are always slightly forward. The things that I do, knitting for hours or reading or driving, I do a lot of driving. My arms are so forward all the time that my back is much broader than my front. I don't have a big chest, so if I were to separate these completely evenly, it would be baggy in front and tight in the back. And I know other people are opposite, or people might be perfectly balanced. So in the pattern, I give perfectly centered sleeve separation numbers, or slightly allowing space in the back, or slightly allowing space in the front. Really just by a few stitches, but I think those numbers would help you figure out how you want your sweater to fit. Also, because this is not the same type of angle as a completely circular yoke, you do have more of a flatness in the front and back, like an oval, and so it does want to sit on your shoulders in a specific way. Like sometimes this spine wants to be right on top if you're a perfectly centered person, or if you're like me, you might want a little bit of that angled back so that you have more room in the back. So you can use these spines, how they are sitting on your body, to figure out which sleeve separation you would like in your design. So I think that ends up being a good fitting thing. Also, just to point out, I think I've pointed it out before, in the back, because you've done all these short rows, you already have an increased depth of the yoke compared to the front. But you do want to notice how the yoke sits on your shoulders, because that also will affect the depth of the yoke in the front versus the back. And when I put it slightly sitting on my back so that I have extra room there, I feel like it's just dipping just slightly below the front. But if you angle it this way, yeah. Anyhow, the back, you don't need any more short rows to lengthen the back. I think that's my point. You have done all your short rows just by virtue of knitting the V. So it's higher in the neck, in the back, and it's also deeper in the shoulder blade area. So you don't need to do extra short rows. So I hope this pattern has appeal for people. You can experiment with yarn. You can use your special fingering weight yarn along with your worsted weight. I really like the Selkirk worsted from Fleece and Harmony, and so I encourage using that, and I'm very excited to finish it and wash it and have it ready for wearing in the fall. So I think that's about it for me today. The only other thing to really comment on is future projects. I am going to do a quick knit of this Ohlone style sweater in a round yoke, and I'm including a very simple version of that in the pattern for the v-neck. So if you do just want to not worry about short rows, you can just use the loop increase method and just knit a circular yoke. I do include some short rows in the back of the neck because I think that's a great way to start a sweater, and it's just the very first part of the pattern that you would do just for that, and then you knit in the round. So I'm going to do a quick knit on that, and I guess I have a couple other sweater ideas too, but that's probably enough to talk about right now. So hope this finds you well. Please comment on the sock idea and the knit along idea, and let me know if you are interested in test knitting. So thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.